Like most lifters, I spent years in the gym lifting heavier and heavier weights, trying to get bigger and stronger. The only problem was that my muscle gains plateaued, and lifting more weight eventually resulted in a serious injury. So I decided to scale back on progressive overload and ramp up my training volume instead. In this video, I'm sharing my progressive volume training experience and results. I learned about progressive volume training from Renaissance periodization. Dr. Mike Israetel advocates adding more sets instead of increasing load when your goal is to maximize muscle growth. His opinions are corroborated by a 2019 study that demonstrated a dose-response relationship. In a nutshell, it showed that increases in training volume produced greater gains in muscle hypertrophy. Still, there's a point of diminishing returns where doing too many sets prevents you from recovering and making new gains. My question was, how many weekly sets should I do to gain muscle without overtraining? So I put together a workout plan and carefully tracked my progress to find out how much volume is too much. In resistance training, volume is the total number of sets you perform each workout session and over the course of a week. For example, if your workout consists of 4 exercises with 5 sets each, your session volume is 20 sets. And if you work out 5 days a week, your total weekly volume is 100 sets. However, our body consists of 8 to 12 muscle groups depending on how you segment it. We can go deeper and look at the number of sets performed for each muscle group. Going into this experiment, I averaged about 120 weekly sets, so I used that as my baseline training volume. Next, I developed a plan to incrementally increase training volume by adding sets each week. The process starts with the lowest volume necessary to build muscle, also called the minimum effective volume. Some research suggests that MEV is around 10 sets per muscle group for advanced lifters. From there, I added 2 sets each week until I got to 16 sets per muscle group. This is sometimes considered the maximum recoverable volume, or the point where you can no longer recover between workouts. After ramping up the volume, I had a deload week where I went back down to 6 sets per muscle group and let my body rest and recover for another mesocycle. During the progressive volume plan, I continued to train my normal 6 days per week. However, I rearranged my workouts to accommodate the increased training volume. I followed a modified version of the bro split workout. It included 2 arm days because they generally recover faster, and I already trained them with pretty high volume. I also separated some muscles that are generally considered one group. For example, I separated the shoulder into individual deltoid heads. Then I paired the side delts with chest and the rear delts with back, since they're complementary muscle groups. And instead of a leg day, I had a quad day and a hamstring day, combined with abs and calves respectively. I didn't include any glute-specific exercises because they get ample stimulation on quad and hamstring days. Plus, I'm not trying to grow a big butt. Likewise, I left out the front delts because they get plenty of work on chest day. To find out if I was recovering from the added training volume, I tracked a few different metrics. First, I wrote down the exercises, sets, reps, and weights lifted for every workout. Then I transferred that information into a spreadsheet at the end of each week. This data showed if my strength increased, decreased, or stayed the same. This is called performance recovery. I also calculated the average work done per set, creating a normalized metric to compare week to week. A positive change indicates improvement, while a negative indicates a potential lack of recovery. Second, I paid close attention to my perceived recovery based on muscle soreness and how I felt after workouts. If my muscles were still sore when it was time to train again, I knew the volume was too high. But if they recovered in time for the next workout, the volume was probably okay. Finally, I monitored recovery using my Oura Ring fitness tracker. This device measures heart rate variability, an indicator of how your body responds to training and stress. A higher HRV is a sign of good recovery, while a lower HRV could indicate that my body was under too much stress. Before starting the progressive volume mesocycle, I took 8 days off from the gym, which was my longest break in years. So I was well rested and itching to get into this new routine. The initial workouts included 10 sets for each muscle group. The only exception were abs and calves, since I had been training them with less volume in my previous workout split. Being the first week, I had no performance recovery data to compare. So I'll start by sharing my perceived recovery and how I felt each day of the new workout routine. The 2 arm days were a breeze because my arms were already used to higher volume. I had no lingering soreness, which reassured me that my biceps and triceps could recover between these workouts. The chest and back days were also relatively easy. However, my side and rear delts were totally blasted after 10 dedicated sets. Surprisingly, the leg days left me limping. My quads were sensitive to the touch, and it hurt to straighten my legs for 3 days after the hamstring and calf workout. At this point, I wondered if my volume progression was even possible. However, my Oura ring showed that my HRV actually went up slightly, meaning the overall systemic stress of the workouts was low and recovery was high. I made it to my rest day and decided to continue with the plan. In week 2, I added 2 additional sets per muscle group, going from 10 to 12. So my total workout volume increased by 16% from 114 to 136 sets. I also multiplied the weight lifted by the number of sets and reps. This resulting total load is the sum of all the weight lifted on every rep. I'm pretty sure this isn't a common metric, but it's what I use to gauge my overall work capacity. From week 1 to week 2, the total load only increased by 10%, which is less than expected with the added sets. This dip in performance could be a sign of overtraining. So I drilled down to see the change in workload for individual muscle groups from week 1 to week 2. This table shows that the work done per set only decreased for the triceps and slightly for the biceps and abs. All other muscle groups performed more work. It looks like the workload decreased on arm day because I went up in weight and got fewer reps. So I tracked the same data the following week to verify the cause of the performance drop. In the 3rd week, I continued the workout volume progression by adding 2 more sets per muscle group, going from 12 to 14. This time, my total workout volume increased by 18% with the added sets, which is on par with the previous change. However, the total load increased by a whopping 63%. As you can see in this table, the increase in work done was primarily due to the additional reps in week 3. Therefore, the reps and sets contributed more to the overall work completed than simply adding another 10 pounds each week. And tracking the average work done per set provided a huge insight into the increase in workload, independent of the rise in volume. This data also showed me that I was still progressing in every muscle group, which was an excellent sign that I hadn't reached my limit. So I continued tracking this data along with my recovery metrics to see if my performance would plateau. Week 4 added 2 more sets per muscle group, going from 14 to 16. Again, I aimed for 1 or 2 more reps per set and only increased weight if the previous week felt way too easy. This time, the total workout volume increased by 15% with the added sets, and the total load increased by 38%. My quads were the only muscle group with a negative workload score, but that's because I added 20 pounds to my squat weight, which resulted in fewer total reps. This performance recovery data suggests that I fully recovered between workouts with 16 sets per muscle group. After the initial shock of the first week, my muscles were no longer getting as sore. My weekly HRV did drop slightly from week 1 to week 4, probably due to the greater metabolic stress from training. However, those numbers are well within my typical range. The following week was a planned deload, where I scaled back all workouts to 6 sets per muscle group. This reset allowed my body to rest for another mesocycle. At the end of the 4 weeks, it was hard to tell if I actually gained muscle. Based on my daily weigh-ins, my body weight fluctuated a lot, but overall the trend line went up. And on average, I gained at least 2 pounds during those 4 weeks. Unfortunately, I didn't measure body composition, so it's hard to say if the gains were from muscle, fat, or just water weight. Regardless, I wouldn't expect to see a drastic change in 28 days on any program. It takes much longer to see noticeable muscle growth, especially considering I've been training for 24 years. Nevertheless, systematically changing training variables while tracking my workouts was eye-opening. It gave me a new understanding of work capacity and adaptations to training. Here are the main things I took away from this experiment. Number 1, don't go up on weight and volume. I realized in week 2 that trying to increase weight and sets resulted in less overall workload because my reps went down. In subsequent weeks, my work capacity increased significantly by keeping the same weight while adding more sets. This result confirms that you should either increase weight or volume, but not both at the same time. Number 2, let reps be your guide. In my experience, tracking reps completed on each exercise from one week to the next was a good indicator of performance recovery. If I got the same number of reps or more, I knew my body was recovering and adapting to the increased workload. The fact that I continued getting more reps in week 4 meant my work capacity was still improving. Number 3, start small. In hindsight, my minimum effective volume was significantly lower for some muscle groups. That's why my abs, calves, and quads were stiff as a board, while my arms breezed right through. Going forward, I would choose a different starting volume for each muscle group based on how much training they're used to getting. Knowing which muscles need more or less volume would prevent the excessive jumps in stress that led to extreme muscle soreness. After a deload week, I continued with another round of progressive volume. This time, I focused only on the muscles I wanted to grow and pushed upwards of 20 sets with arms, shoulders, and calves, but I held at 10 sets for the remaining muscle groups and gradually increased weight.
We all have different training experience levels, work capacities, recovery abilities, and external stressors. That means your ideal training volume is probably different from mine. And homing in on an effective progression takes some trial and error.
Here are my guidelines for finding how many sets you should do for muscle growth. Step 1, rest. Giving your body a break before increasing training volume is a good idea. You can do this with a deload week where you pull back on training volume and intensity, or just take an entire week off from the gym. A rest and recovery period lets you start your progressive volume plan with a clean slate. Step 2, reset. Return to the gym with what you believe is a reasonable MEV. For most people, the minimum effective dose for resistance training is 5 to 10 sets per muscle group, but it could be as little as 3 sets for beginners or for muscles you don't train as much. More experienced lifters may even need to start with more than 10 sets. Use your best judgment and adjust as needed. Step 3, ramp up. Add 1 or 2 sets per muscle group each week. Continue adding sets for 3 to 6 weeks or until you feel like you've hit your MRV. Keep tabs on your perceived recovery, which is muscle soreness, fatigue, and whether you get a pump from your workouts. You can also track your weights and reps to check for performance recovery dips. Step 4, repeat. At the end of your progressive volume mesocycle, take another deload week and start the process again. You can increase or decrease your MEV based on what you learned during the first cycle, or you can change goals and go back to progressing with weight instead of volume.
Paying more attention to my workouts showed me that you don't have to keep pushing heavier weights to make progress in the gym. Trying this progressive volume approach also reignited my passion for working out, and that motivation alone can lead to transformative results. So if you're ready to build muscle, subscribe to my channel for more workout inspiration.